Another economic blow from Russia. It's being felt across Europe. Overnight, Russia cut off gas to two EU nations, Poland and Bulgaria, an escalation in a conflict that is increasingly seen as a wider battle with the West. European leaders are calling the move, quote, blackmail. This all comes as the war inches closer to Moldova. For a second day in a row, explosions rocking a separatist region, knocking out two powerful radio antennas. And new overnight, Russian forces are stepping up strikes on a steel plant that is housing hundreds of Ukrainian fighters and civilians in Mariupol. Our Joe Khalil live at the White House with all of this. Joe.
Yeah, Adrian, there was supposed to actually be an agreement to try to get some of the civilians out of that steel plant that you just referenced. But rather than a ceasefire, there are local reports on the ground right now from Mariupol that suggest that actually the bombing over that plant has not just continued, but has gotten worse over the last 24 hours or so. And this comes as Russia is trying to hit back at the West using Europe's dependence on Russian oil and gas as leverage.
In a clear retaliation for Western support to Ukraine, Russia is suspending its gas supply to Bulgaria and Poland. Much of Europe, still heavily reliant on Russian oil and gas, now looking elsewhere as the war in Ukraine persists.
This is, of course, a turning point. The Russians are speeding it up, but we can handle it.
For now, Bulgarian and Polish leaders say the summer months ahead will help lower demand. Meantime, two more blasts in the country of Moldova, Ukraine's neighbor to the west, an alarming sign, according to Ukrainian President Zelensky, that Russia intends to go beyond Ukraine in its invasion.
The reason is clear: in order to destabilize the situation in the region, to threaten Moldova by showing that if Moldova supports Ukraine, there will be these steps.
The explosions in Moldova hit a radio center and a security headquarters. The country's government now on high alert. All of this happening in the hours after the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres met with Vladimir Putin face-to-face in Russia, hoping to move further toward peace. The two leaders announced an agreement in principle on an evacuation plan for civilians still stuck in the port city of Mariupol. But even as efforts to protect civilians may be underway, Russian leaders are escalating their rhetoric. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov saying the possibility of both nuclear war and World War III are realistic scenarios.
The danger is serious, real, and we must not underestimate it.
Now, leaders from both Poland and Bulgaria say that as Russia's trying to cut off their supply of oil and gas, they do have enough supply to meet their country's needs, at least for now and through the summer. But, Adrian, this comes as a lot of European countries are really rethinking how they get their energy supply, trying to cut Russia out so they don't have to be dependent on them anymore, especially as we head out of this conflict in Ukraine.
Well, I don't know when we're heading out of it, but there's a lot of breaking news to discuss surrounding it, including this prisoner swap to bring a U.S. veteran home. Talk about that.
Yeah, so this just broke a little while ago, and we're talking about Trevor Reed. His parents have actually been on NewsNation a couple of times. He's the former Marine. Never a former Marine, I should say, but he was arrested in Russia. The Russian narrative is that he had a night of heavy drinking and assaulted a Russian officer, serving a 9-year prison sentence, and just now announcing that the prisoner swap is for Konstantin Yaroshenko. This is a man who was convicted in the U.S. to a 20-year sentence for dealing cocaine. We're not exactly sure the details of how the agreement came about, but what we can tell you is that it is rather surprising that there have been diplomatic efforts even before the war started to try to get Trevor Reed back into the United States. The fact that it happened now during this conflict is surprising. We may learn more today as to how this deal between the U.S. and Russia came about.
Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click on the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.